morning. I thought I'd change the view frame for some reason or other. Guitar arrived this morning. This is Craig's Vintage V100. The lemon burst thing. This is sort of ready relict jobby, and isn't it beautiful looking? Well, I like it. I like the dulled paint. It's come from a cash converters, a penny short of 200 quid, which is kind of full price, if you know what I mean, but a lovely guitar nonetheless. So this one's interesting because Craig, who sent it, has sort of drawn my attention to a couple of things, some fret buzzing, and a feeling he's got that some of the frets are a little bit lower than others, which of course we're going to find out shortly when I tune it up and see exactly what buzzes and how much. And it's one of these guitars that clearly it's been pre-owned, so it has a life of, it's been pre-owned, so it has a life before Craig got hold of it. And my feeling straight away, I hold this thing and I'm thinking to myself, I don't ever recall the V100 neck being this sharp. There's something sharp about this. Now, I don't know what that means, but that's my first observation. I could just be imagining it. Do I think it's been refretted or something? And the board radius? Don't know. Ooh, ooh, that's off the bridge for starters. That's not good. Ooh. All right, what's happened here? Okay, this has got tucked in behind a fret, the end of the fret. Okay, so I have in front of me something about this guitar. There's something about this guitar. There is something about this guitar that's drawing my attention to it. Something about it. I don't know what it is. It's just one of those things. I kind of look for telltale signs of stuff because it kind of is what helps me figure things out, really. Just feels really flat. Thin and flat, but okay, the thinness of the neck is what it is. Just a feeling. I can't tell you why. Anyway. So, I don't know where my bits of metal and stuff are. Oh, they're over here now. See, move the thing and I get completely confused. Alright, so we've currently got an action sitting at around nearly 2. Actually, no. Just on 2. 2 and, wow, okay, 2 and 2.4, 2 and 2.4, which is interesting. So the low E is lower than the high E. Let's see what happens were I to just drop this down a little bit to begin with room to do it. So we drop it in and we drop it in more at this end. .5 just over, that's 1.5 still over, so a bit more down. funny, I was just saying to Claire and inside the house, you know, picking up a guitar and saying something feels strange about this neck, and sort of not quite trusting myself to know what that meant. And yet 350 setups later, should listen to it, because to get it right okay, so the action is now lowered. I haven't checked for the relief. I'm just jumping ahead here a little bit. I wasn't really going to get stuck into this just yet, but let's have a look at the relief. Well, there is some relief in the neck, enough to work with for now. Right, okay, so observations. Don't worry about that. Sounds noisy because it's in a shed. That's my wooden radius block falling off. Observations about this guitar is, for looking at it, we've got frets that are quite worn from playing. This has been played a lot to wear out, so the guitar's clearly been kept in good condition. It's nice, you know, overall. Again, the relic sort of is easier to keep in good condition because you don't obviously show up tiny little scratches and stuff. So it's in nice condition, but it's been it has a bit of glue stuff down there or something on the lacquer, but it's nice condition and it's been played a lot. The frets are, well, the frets are quite flattened. I think Craig's right in noticing that. Interestingly, they're not flattened or they're not grooved in the ways that you typically expect when you find something that's been played a lot. So I'm wondering whether these have, I suspect these have, in fact looking at the ends of them, I think these have been levelled by someone in the past anyway, which is again not surprising. To be honest, looking at the action of the way it plays at the very low action, that's actually quite, and that's quite a good achievement. Not perfect. It is a thin neck, that's for sure, so it's quite flexible. We might put a tiny bit more curvature in it. You heard a bit of rattle there. That's not fret buzz, that's string rattle, because there's hitting the frets a little bit, might need a little bit more curvature. Quite a low action here as well, so it might be worth checking. Well, it will be worth checking that out. Yeah. So first observations. Nothing. It's not the end of the world, but it's been levelled, but it hasn't been crowned. I don't think. I can see that there's a couple of frets here, ends of frets that are quite flattened off, which is what you'd expect if they were, you know, fairly uneven or they hadn't seated properly. And judging by the sharpness of these, a couple of the frets at the end here, fact, it's consistent. The ones that are showing up, the ones I can see have been hit hardest are in fact standing up. You can see them at the edges. It would require a close-up shot, and actually there aren't that many of them on here, but I can tell you, without looking at them, I can tell you the ones I expect to be flattened on the ends are that one basically, and a little bit of these three. Definitely, and lo and behold, that's exactly what we see. So the flattening corresponds with the sticky uppiness, and that sticky uppiness is probably nothing we can do about it now. It doesn't really, well, it moves very fractionally. We could try clamping it, but the problem is it's been leveled to accommodate that, but you can tell because it has a burr pulling up this way. It's a really good way of showing that one particularly. That's a duff one. In a sense it's not a problem, because what happens is once this is put in and it's glued into place and it stays there, it has a tiny bit of downward movement, but you struggle to press it down with a screwdriver, and you won't be pressing it down with your finger. So to all intents and purposes this fret is where it's going to be and it's permanently fixed. What happens though, of course, is it's stuck up in the air a little bit at the edges because it's not seated right the way flat. As a result, then when somebody fret levels it, you get a flat spot that shows up quite substantially. The question is, you know, do we pull it? Well, if you pull it, you have to clean out the slot, you put a new fret in, and you still have to level that fret down to the same level of all of the rest of these that have been done, which is kind of counterproductive in a way. In a way, there's nothing wrong with this. This is just a fix to a mechanical problem that was inherent in the build of the guitar, basically. But Craig's right to notice that some of them, I would say, rather than lower, some of them are flatter than others, but they've been flattened to reach a workable level, which is, you know, standard fare. It's what people do when they dress or level frets. I would suggest that we might be a bit low here on that first low E, which is why currently it's hitting that first fret a little bit too much. It probably needs a little tiny bit more relief, and I think we've got to knock off this nut because I think it's, well, I know for a fact it's too low on the low E, which is why a combination of tiny bit too little relief and the low slot is causing that slap. So the prognosis or diagnosis for this, the Peter Green, I think it's the Peter Green, isn't it? Yeah, with all the sort of holes in the back and sort of drilled holes for pick guards that weren't there, and then the two. Alright, that's not very well fixed on, is it? And that's moving too, so I'm going to take care of those because they're actually loose, and that's going to cause wiring problems. So just remember that the gold ones are to the outside. No, they're all gold. Oh, that's not the right pen to use on the bottom. Oh, what am I doing? Anyway, let's just take a photograph, just so I don't forget. I should be fine because they've got volume and tone written on them anyway. But that isn't entirely foolproof. Right, so I'm going to take these off because they are in danger. These are very difficult to get off without a bit of cloth to help us. You can see these are mini pots technology. It'd be kind of, maybe I think most of the, in fact just about all Les Paul copies that I see are mini pot. There's not much room in there, but it would be nice to have better quality than that. Difficult to get the, sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. Difficult to get the cloth underneath the edge of this thing. It's absolutely flush to the surface, so I need a little bit of a light bit of plastic or something to just lift it a tiny bit so I can get the edge of the cloth under there. Did I say cloth? Anyway, so yeah, diagnosis, it's not a new guitar. For the price it's been sold at, honestly, I think it's a little bit overpriced if that's the price you paid for it. This is really resistant. Plastic. Personally, I know they're very well sought after. but for me, in my estimation, can't really get anything under there. But I do want to be able to clean this thing up. No, it won't do it. Ah, caramba. Well, that's a really tricky one. I haven't got fingernails, and well, I cut my fingernails, but to get them under there, maybe a bit of paper at some point. Yeah. Don't want to use metal or anything like that, so that's no good. Thin bit of plastic. Edge of a packet, something which of course you've never got. A bit of cardboard. It's a bit too soft anyway. Nope. Yeah, so for me it feels a bit overpriced. Okay, so the biggest gap we've got is under the back edge there. Let's try that. Yeah, look, if you pay £200 for it with frets that are fairly worn, I feel that's just a little more than I would pay. But otherwise it's in pretty good condition. I can finally, hopefully, get this cloth. Hey, thank you. And that one's loose, well loose as well. So there's plenty to do to sort those out. It's not good. Anyway, yeah, but everything else about it's okay, but this plastic nut has to go because it's too low there anyway. So that's a kind of an early doors thing to do. So yeah, so outlook for this, right? We've got sharp fret here, which to be honest you'll only occasionally feel. Actually, you do feel them a little bit here if you're playing right at the top. So I'll try and smooth that off a little bit. Difficult, not a lot of access there, of course, but we'll do that. I'm not going to try and glue those 3 frets any further down, because all that will happen is we'll create even lower spots, because they've already been leveled to accommodate the sticking upness. So if we then press that back down, you're going to get a string that has to go. You've created a flat spot, or a low spot I should say, which means it'll probably fretting here will probably choke out on the last fret, which means that has to be lowered even further. So it's not ideal, but it's not a showstopper. So looking at this, generally speaking, is there enough material on here to level this out a little bit, to take care of some of the tiny wear that's on here, and also can we round off and reshape the frets? Yes, I think we can. This, I have to say, doesn't feel high at all. These are quite low frets, so this is never going to feel like it's got jumbo frets or anything on it. Other than that, this edge is really sharp. I don't know if that's how it came, but we can gently soften that off in the fret sanding process once we've done the bit about once we've what's the word I'm looking for? Once we've leveled the frets. So that's no problem either. We'll just take care of that when the time comes. So to begin with, I'm just going to take the truss rod cover off, and I think we will give it the tiniest width more. Truss rod cover clearly has been off in the past, so this guitar has received attention from somebody in the past. Well, it's obvious from the fret leveling, but you know, it's not a bad go. You know, it's what you do when you take a guitar and level the frets to make the action play as low as you can make it. The person's done what you'd expect. All they haven't done. Right, we've got a snapped off screw. Okay, so this has to lift off over the little sheared screw. So somebody's basically extended the hole to go to the right of the sheared off screw. So somebody's stripped the screw, and you can actually, you won't be able to see it with that, but I'll take a picture of it close up here. There's a stripped off screw that somebody's then kind of given up on and basically just gone to the outside. Now there's possibly enough material on there for me to pull that out with a pair of pliers, judiciously held. But the interesting part for me is whether this was listed as new or what condition. It's not. It doesn't say on the little sticker on the back. It's just, you know, it's got the new, used or reconditioned or whatever written on there, but it doesn't actually say. Now the tricky part is we want to get as a big a bite onto it as possible, and I think I'll start by just freeing up this little chap here, and off comes the nut, which is not a bad plastic actually. It could maybe be reused at some point, but it's not ideal, so we will go with a replacement bone nut. It's a brighter colour, but it's much better quality, much more workable. Now while I'm at it, not that you can actually see anything, is I'm going to have a go at removing this sheared little screw down here, and it may or may not be possible. And really, given the size of it, there's only one option, which is to grab it and attempt to turn it with a bit of mighty manual force. And that's all I'm going to try and do, and hope for the best. Because anything else, we may not get any outcome at all. I suspect that's actually coming out. There's some pure brute force thing. That looks like it is coming out to me, but again, I'm just going on sheer brute force, hoping for the best. I think that is definitely coming out. Eventually, of course, it will be looser. That doesn't really fix the problem now that we've got a what do we call it, a cover with an extra bit of plastic or an extra hole drilled in it, or a widened hole to fit the other thing. But there we go, we are out. Sheared off bit of screw removed, so we can put the original back in, which will probably look, now it appears like it sits smack bang, it will probably look just about okay, slightly better than before, but there we go. It's just one of those things that is slightly annoying, but it tells you the tale, it starts to reveal some of the history of the guitar and how it's been treated or what's happened to it. So I'm just going to have a look at this one. This is a good bone copy actually for this guitar. It's a curved nut. It's kind of more like an acoustic guitar nut, but this one has the same style nut, so we could replace it with this one. As I say, just matching it up. The position of the string spacing is exactly the same. This one's a little wider, so I need to take it down, but I'll do that shortly. Then what I'll do is let's do the small adjustment to the truss rod first. So, do a little, keep knocking things off. Oh, I am clumsy. So let's find the point. Right. So we had what we were saying. We had too little curvature, so I need to slack the truss rod off just a tad. That will be enough. It's about a 1/16 of a turn or something. Just going to now, where I'm at it then, let's just get this nut thinned down to the right dimension. I do prefer to work with bone, given the chance, or given the option I should say. It's a very dependable substance to cut, I find. and when it comes to cutting these nut slots, that really features highly on my list of priorities, that sort of dependability, mainly because the sizes or the clearances that I work with when cutting these nut slots are so fine that it really needs that dependable cutting quality, cutting performance maybe is a way of saying it. And I find that some of the plastics, the softer the plastics are, the more unpredictable, or the less predictable they are, and the more bone-like they are in their hardness, then the more workable they are as well. Although they still don't quite cut the same. So we're getting there. I'm just going to wipe all this out. So for me, bone is the best all-round, most dependable substance, particularly when working with these tight clearances that I end up doing. Not quite sitting down in the slot yet, nearly there. So I always prefer to use bone, except where stylistically it's just so much off the mark. Okay, well that's a perfect fit. Now, right now it's too high, and I have a kind of little device I made earlier with which is a standard fret. Well, I think it's a bit of jumbo fret with a 0.75 bit of copper underneath, and that gives me kind of the height of the frets plus what does it give me? It gives me the height of the fret plus well over the height of the gap that I want. But it's all small enough to make, or it's conservative, but it still gives me a sort of start point for knowing how much I need to take the nut down. So I just put that in there and look and say, well, actually this isn't too far off, so rather than take any more off the bottom, I'm going to work downwards from the top, and if I need to reshape the nut later from the top down, I'll do that, which is an easy process to do. So straight away I'm just going to clean this off again, because I don't need the pencil mark on there. I'm just going to go straight ahead and add a couple of dabs of glue into this slot here, just to hold the nut, the new nut, and then we'll work down. So an early thing is to work it down to the correct first fret action for each string. Put that in place, make sure it lines up smoothly either side, check the spacings, and then basically the first thing I'm going to do is just, no, I'm not going to lift the end up, that's the annoying bit. While the glue's still wet, basically the strings now can be used as a clamp. I just need to make sure it sits in the right position first before we apply too much pressure, and actually we don't need to apply much more than that. So I'm going to leave this for 10 minutes, just feeling the fit, and that's a really nice fit. It may be a fraction that we could take off. Well, not even that. It's flush with the rest of the finish. It's just not the binding is just curved in a little bit, but that's actually a perfect fit. Strings are perfectly aligned, and actually they're high, but they won't take that long to go down, especially because it's bone and it's easy to work. Okay, so I'm going to leave that drying. I'm going to stop the video right now, put this in my spares, my possible reuse one day nut department, tidy up a little bit, start putting these components in a single pot where they can hide out safely till I'm ready for them again without getting lost. This doesn't belong, that's a possible replacement for the tanglewood. Yeah, and then I'll come back and we'll start the process of setting up on this one. But I just thought it'd be an interesting, introduce you to it to kick off. And obviously I'm going to take the back off, but along with everything else I'm going to take the back off. Well, I'll do that now actually. Take the back off and tighten up those pots so that they don't spin and break the connections, which is what they will do. That's the shame. I haven't heard this guitar yet, so I don't know how well it plays. Judging by the look of the pots that are sticking through the top of the body, I would suggest that it's absolutely bog standard wiring in here. Like I say, mini pots, which is a bit of a... it does the job, but it just looks a little bit weedy. Now, I haven't asked Craig this, but I will remove the cash converters thing, so it never says quite what it is, or it doesn't say quite what it is here. It's a vintage guitar, and there's the price, but it doesn't tell you whether it's new. You can see tons of dust on the back, so it's definitely not new. Absolutely standard wiring. These are actually four wire pickups, so you could, I don't think there is any, no, there is no coil tapping, but you could put coil splitting in if you wanted to, but it's a fairly book standard layout, nothing to write home about. It should all work as is, but I will tighten these up because I don't know if you can see, but they're pretty much all rattling around, and they will eventually, if you can see it, yeah, they will eventually break the wires, and then it won't work at all. So there we have it. Pause for now. Plan of action already lined up, should be good. No reason why this shouldn't play. Frets will be a little bit lower. We'll precision fret level it to take the least amount of metal off in order to make it play as well as it can. And we'll take these things off and give them a clean and everything. There shouldn't be any reason why it won't play beautifully. These are definitely sticking up, and you can I'll do a couple of close-ups before I work on them, because you can tell that. I probably should get the other camera out for this, technically speaking, but I can blow this up, as it were. So you can tell when the frets are sticking up, because you can see that they've been worked on for a start. Get far enough out to get a shot of it. They sit up at the end and they're scratchy. That side's worse actually, but they also have a sticky up kind of gap that you can actually see at the edges. It just gets in the way of the fingers. It feels scratchy to the touch, but I can take care of that part, but we won't. It isn't really feasible to stick them down. And also take a couple of shots of the widest flat spots where you can see it's been worked on pretty aggressively. It's never quite as visible when you photograph it as when you see it with your naked eye, strangely, but you should be able to zoom in if necessary afterwards. So yeah, doable. Shouldn't be a problem. I'll just sort of, let's have a zoom in on this and see what it shows. Yeah, you can see it's been worked, and you can get a sense of the wide flat spots. Like I said, it's very difficult to photograph it. Come on, I just want the camera. Give me a break. It's quite difficult to photograph it. It looks much clearer with the naked eye, especially when you just got to get the right distance from it to get a focus on it. very well. Okay, and then the flattened end, which is right there. I can just get one more shot of the sticky up bits. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not a bad representation of it. See that? You can see the gap under that one in particular, and that's because the overhang bit, which is cut so it doesn't, you can overhang the binding. Doesn't stick down for one reason or another. So we've got a bit of tidying up to do there. Right, that should be fine. I'm just gonna, what I will do is I'll put this under playing tension now. Half expecting it to go twang. Okay, this is obviously now mega high action at the nut end, but we'll take care of that. Right, we'll just leave that there. The nut is now setting and we'll come back to it and work on it a bit later on. I've got to take a run into town, so I'm going to do that, and I've got a few things to do today. That tanglewood is going to stay on hold because I'm waiting for the roller bridge to arrive, but when that's arrived, that's a quick changeover, quick intonate, and we're done. We've got the vintage, the old classic SG2000 Yamaha SG2000 inside, ready to polish up, pack up and send back. We've got Carl's Levinson blade with some electrical issues. We've got to have a look at that, a slow, calm look at that, and that will be off camera with the music playing to calm me down. And then we've got this setup to do. So there's quite a lot to do today, but I'm happy to be busy in Real Love Guitars workshop. It's much better to be busy and having fun than to be sitting at home thinking about what to do next. Alright, I'm going to put this standing up. I feel a little bit happier when it's not kind of so much in the window. There's no real reason for being paranoid. It's a very safe place, but it's just my little thing. Anyway, right, see you in a bit. Welcome back. Okay, so I've got the I'm going to use the strings on here are 9s by the feel of it. I'm pretty sure they are. I'm just going to double check, but I've got a set of hybrid 9s to go on when this is done, and it means I've got a set of whatchamacallums, those things, nut slot files lined up for slightly above the hybrid 9 gauge, which is how I like to do it, because I want them to be looser rather than tight. So I kick off by taking off these two, and I go with my D, choice of D, and then basically using my 0.3mm or 0.3mm feeler gauge, I'm going to work this nice dependable bone nut slot down, angled backwards, but work it down to the 0.3. So I'm heading down until the point where the feeler gauge kind of touches the underside of the string. And obviously it's going to take a little while because it's quite a tall nut at the moment, but I can also help it on its way with a bit of a widening with this triangle file, which stops things binding in the slot, gives me a bit of a V to work with. And so the process here is just to get a nice slot cut of the correct diameter, size, and you can see I'm tilting back to do it so that the string comes up the back of the nut and launches off the front point. We're nearly there. Now what we'll end up with is all the strings will be at the bottom of a canyon, if you like, a bit, but we'll put that right by removing all the excess material off the top of the nut, and it will be obviously a little bit custom shaped by the time we finish with it, but it means we'll only have as much bone material in there as we actually need. Pretty much almost on the mark there, a little bit of fresh air still. So I go for very low action, relatively speaking, relative to how most of these guitars come out of the factory. So 0.3 is just on there, and it's a very small amount. Now this will of course increase as we level the frets, because leveling the frets will take some material. But it won't be a huge amount. So anyway, just pull to one side. I'm going to start with the triangular file just to get this slot going. Constantly checking it. Been a day of listening to the off and on listening to the politics or the fallout from yesterday's general election voting. We're in an interesting place, as you no doubt know. Tories with a minority government using the Democratic Unionist Party, or whatever it's called, as their what do you call it? I don't know, collaboration thingy. So who knows what's going to happen next? A lot of people, obviously anti-Theresa May people, saying that she now no longer has the credibility to either head up the government and lead the party and or lead Brexit negotiation. Who knows? I guess she's legitimately permitted to do it. The system, the law allows it. So. It's a very weird time. I think in some ways we couldn't be in a worse position heading into the Brexit negotiations. I guess some people think it's better. Some people think that Theresa May's stance is, I don't know, softened by losing the kind of majority in the House. But, anyway, for those of you overseas who are not interested at all in British politics, sorry about that. Theresa May. I think we're on the mark there. Just about. Well, I've still got fresh air. You hear a woodpecker outside, which is quite a strange sound. It's not a sound from my youth. I think these are recent arrivals on these shores. On the mark. So this then, first thing this does, even if we only adjusted the nut slots, the transformation in the guitar's playing action is so great that it feels like a completely different guitar. Now, if you've watched my videos before, one of the things you'll know is that I have a kind of an interest in the peculiarities of this Les Paul neck, or the Les Paul copy neck, whichever you want to call it, the Les Paul style neck, the set Les Paul style neck. It's quite an interesting beastie because, as you know, it starts off thin and then it thickens up to, in this case, you could probably say it's nearly 3 times its original thickness. It's a substantial change, and at the point that it actually thickens up, it also is the same point where it's glued to a huge wall of mahogany down here, or whatever the hardwood is. So, first thing you can know about Les Paul style necks is that from here onwards they don't bend. If you adjust the truss rod, they tend to bend from here. So you end up with what I call a sickle, which is a handle, a flat piece here, and a curved blade down there. Obviously that's exaggerated, it's not that curved, but in principle it's still a flat bit meeting a curve, and where the two meet actually creates a kind of knuckle or a join part around about here. So the smooth curve is interrupted by that kind of corner where the two parts join. Now that, if you think about looking at the curve in the mind's eye, then that means that there is no smooth curve all the way along the length of this. It goes down to there and up over a hump into a straight line. So there's this part here where the two join that's as far as the curve that you're trying to, or I suppose it just sticks out. It's like I call it an elbow or a knuckle. The point is, most fret leveling methods try to overcome that by, I think, something that's called fall away, fall off, where from about the 13th fret onwards, setter uppers try to just kind of flatten, progressively level the frets harder the further away back from the 13th fret they go. And in a way that probably does cure the problem, but it's actually overkill, and the only reason I found that out is because the method I use does it in a much more elegant way, which has become another of the many reasons, another of the several reasons why I continue to use this method. Maybe we'll reconnect with those spot on, those reasons later on. Yeah, so the method I use is a method where I level the frets with the neck curved, but as you know, it's curved but it's not exactly curved. But the tool I use to do the leveling can't reproduce that curve followed by angle followed by straight, so it just does a curve from start to finish, and it sort of maps that curve gently into this congested area down here. It sort of cuts it or scoops it out, which is a very neat way of overcoming it without having to do this fall off thing, over aggressive fall off. So you see it when we come down to the fret leveling. On less than a minute you'll see how it works. I'm hoping you might see how elegant it is, and I'm just going to cut these down a bit while I'm at it, since I've got this tool in my hand at the moment. Just do a little bit more on this one, but not too much. Okay, so back to the correct one. I'll take my 24, and now I'm working on the G to get it down to the level of the thingy, feeler gauge. Listening to somebody critiquing Jeremy Corbyn's quote-unquote lies on the radio. Unhappy critique. You lied, Corbyn, you told me I'd get free tuition, you told me we'd get free benefits, free everything. We shall see. Anyway, the rant is still ongoing. All the crimes of Jeremy Corbyn being listed. His critique of Theresa May is: the silly woman went after the old age pensioners for no reason. She didn't need to do it. Almost there. Okay, we're on the mark. It's very low, this action, but there we go. The height that I go for on these guitars is as a result of my original sort of experiments using the capo, and I found that the dear me, he's ranting. I found that the first fret action when you use a capo on a guitar with an action set as it currently is here, low, is about 1.1 of a millimetre on the first fret, and it plays really nicely like that. So I took that as my start point, and I went up to halfway between that and the point which I'd noticed that you tend to start to get intonation problems, which is around 0.5 of a mil or more. So I kind of halved that and went to 0.3. And that's the screw rattling. Yeah, I went to 0.3 as my target, which is where I am now. And actually you can go as low as 0.1 and it will play. But I like to stay at 0.3. It gives me a little bit of room. Can go to 0.25 on all of them if I overcut one of them, and I want to be really consistent. But bone is, as I said before, very dependable substance. Nearly there on this one. It's all down to Theresa May. I'm furious with the woman, says the caller. Okay, we're on the mark there. Again, fret screw moving down that end. It's so annoying. That's actually sitting a tiny bit higher because it's you can hear it still plays. It's when we're looking for the point where the string just starts to touch the feeler gauge and getting choked off, and we're not quite there yet, but we are quite deep into this slot, so it's quite hard to gently go further down. Right, we're on, that's as far as I'm going. And then we've got the final one, which is often the hardest one because it's the finest one of all. We're on the top E, and I'm doing a 0.11 instead of the 9 that it's actually on. This guy's annoying me on the radio. He's a kind of shouting, shrieking Cockney. Nothing against Cockneys, but kind of angry van man sound. I could see through all that. Let me tell you another thing. Oh, you must. I'm probably going to have to turn this off because it really is annoying. So he's kind of, I don't know if he's sort of critiquing Corbyn, but he's also doubly critiquing May because he's basically saying she lost it more than Corbyn won it. Although Corbyn didn't win it exactly, but he's lost for words, I can tell you. Okay, we're almost there with this one. Like I said, it's very, very difficult to keep this one. It's so easy to overcut, and if you do, you're into sort of fixing mode. I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah, well, will do me. Okay, so that's an amazing action I've got on here. Wow. With this neck being so low, so thin, the whole action feels incredibly low now. But that's what we were aiming for. Right, we are ready. So now you can see this. You probably can see these are low in the nut, and of course we will take the Dremel to that in a minute once the strings are off, and I'll take that right down to the lowest point. And these are so low off the first fret. There'll be hardly any nut material there when we finish, but that's the way it should be. The nut material isn't there for any other purpose than holding the strings at the correct height over the first fret, and you don't need it there just for some sort of visual thing. It's pointless having it there, because to have the strings at the right height and to have loads of nut material would necessitate sinking the strings way down into the slots like this, and it not only looks a bit crap, it also increases the risk of the slots grabbing the strings and causing tuning problems. So we're going to get rid of most of that. So the first thing I'm going to do to get ready for the next stage, this guy still shouting in my ear hole, sorry, lug hole. I'm just going to take the strings, slack the strings off for a minute. This stage in the game, using these old strings as sacrificial strings, I'm just hoping that they stay on or they don't break long enough for me to mark up the frets ready to do the fret leveling. So that's what I'm going to do here, is with the frets out of the way, just mark these up, and this marker pen is going to be the guide that tells me where I am in terms of how the file is cutting. This guy is really, the tone of his voice is enough to make me want to go out and kill people. Didn't say that really, but he's horrible. It's the kind of guy that's just, it's like he's a balloon that somebody's filled with too much air, and now it's all screaming out through the neck of the balloon with a kind of shrieking noise. Horrible sound. Anyway, meanwhile, let's put this back on. We'll get on with the fret leveling first, and once the fret leveling is done, I'll take the strings off, and then I'll do the cut down the nut. Again, I'll get a tune out of this because I want it to be close. He's still screaming. Oh shit. Great. We're going to put a whole 9 minutes of that guy's rant, high-pitched, strained rant, on their podcast. Okay, so now we're going to do the fret leveling. The fret leveling is the fun part of it. Everything's fun, but so we use banana fret leveling file, which is this truss rod with sandpaper on the underside, and I'm going to use my what do we call it, a hex key to tune it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on equidistant along the length of the fingerboard, and then just check that I can reach all of the three things, which I can. And then the idea is I'm going to calibrate this rod with the sandpaper by tightening up or slacking it off to curve it. So right now I'm going to tighten it a tiny bit, and the aim is to get it to where it matches the curve precisely that's in the neck. Now it's a very fine curve, you can barely see it, the relief curve in this neck, but this tool is sensitive enough to be able to make tiny adjustments to eventually arrive at the point where it mimics or copies that curve exactly. And you know it when it is, because all three of these little brass feet will touch it at exactly the same time with the same amount of force or contact pressure. And that's fine to begin with. So it's something you can only develop through doing, and it becomes a sort of second nature after a while. And then I spread the strings away from that first track, the E track, and then I'll put this on here, and with gravity alone I'm going to just run the tool up and down on the frets and let the thing kind of, the tool's weight do most of the work really. And I'm just going to go up and down in that track, i.e. the space cleared for that string by moving that string, and I go up and down a fair bit, and then I'm going to stop. And the great thing about that is I can then really closely examine the cut pattern. So what we can see first of all is that it's cutting in all parts of the neck, which means the curve is matching correctly. If it was only cutting in two parts, it might be that the bar or the rod is too straight. If it's cutting only in the middle, it could be because it's too curved. But the fact that it's cutting in all three places means it's cutting right, or it's shaped right. And what we can see is it's taking quite a bit off here and here, these three, not so much here, and it's taking a bit off that one, and a bit off that one, and a bit off that one. So where it's cutting most, it's the tool's way of telling us which frets were the most uneven, relatively uneven. Now the great thing about this process, which in my mind is why it beats other ways of doing it, is without going any further I can now take put the string back on, and audition every note. And the idea is I want to keep going until every note on this action that I've set plays correctly, and that's what this is about. It's about making this action play, or making the neck or the frets comply with this nice low action that I've chosen at both ends of this guitar. So previously it's the uneven frets that tend to dictate how high you can have your action. If you aren't able to do this part of the process, then how high you have it is dictated by the frets. You don't have a choice. You lower it until the uneven frets kick in and get in the way and choke off the notes. That's good. I'm going to stop there. In the case of this system, because of this approach, I get to stop leveling at exactly the point where I've freed up the notes or I've leveled the frets enough so that the guitar plays beautifully at the action that we've chosen, and I don't go any further than that because it isn't necessary. I don't need to level below the point at which my chosen action plays. I'm aiming to just achieve that one thing, which is to make that action play the best it can. Now what you'll probably see is that there's a couple of frets here that seem to be taking a fair bit off them, and that's this problem with the hump I was mentioning before. And so this curved tool is gently scooping out that hump. And stop there. That's good. Now at this point I'm going to recalibrate for the next track. I use the same calibration for the first two, but for the third track, or the G track, I'm going to recalibrate because the relief curve in the neck sometimes changes across the whole, as we come across the radius. So the relief changes as we come across the radius. In this case I need to just flatten it out a tiny bit more. In doing so, that's too much flattened out. So now I'm going to just the tiniest, hardly noticeable adjustment until they touch, and that's there again. So now I do the G track. So I move the G out of the way, spread the string, and keep my sleeve out of the way. And again, pretty much starting out with gravity only. The gravity is really good because the weight of the bar will be enough to remove metal, and it will very quickly show me which frets are high and which frets are cutting as we go along. And then at any point I want, I can stop again and evaluate where we are. Again, this one's a real big problem right here. It's taking loads off that, and this one. So there's a clear problem choking there. Now again, time to stop and check. Not right there, that's choked off. So again, you've got to remember this is an incredibly low action, so as I always say, I'm pushing this very hard, as I always do to begin with. If it reaches a point that there's not enough fret metal to safely continue to level it down to play at the kind of ultra low action that I've adventurously chosen, then it may be that we compromise a little bit and back off a tiny bit and set the action just a fraction higher, rather than continue to take fret metal away. But I'll stop at this, so 2 good goes at it, and if it needs, still doesn't play, I'll consider that's okay. I'm going to stay with that, because don't forget, sanding is going to take some more off these frets as well. Only a small amount, but it still nonetheless will be a little bit more, which will add to the clearance that we've got there. So I can see that this fret here particularly has got a lot, and that fret, and half of this fret, and this fret here, so and that one there has been taken, these two in fact. So there's a lot of high frets being hit on by this process right now, which is exactly what has to happen if it's going to play at the low action that Craig wants, or that most people want actually for a guitar like this. But the truth is, because of the inherent unevenness that comes on any fretboard, and I have to say, in my experience now, over 300 setups, about 350 or more even, it's pretty clear that just about every guitar has uneven frets, regardless of the price point and the construction method. It's just simply not possible to get, unless you're working with, I don't know, Kevlar or steel or titanium or something. But with wood and nickel steel frets, whatever they're made of, it's impossible to get micro accuracy. So that one, you see, that one's low and the next one's high. Yeah, so basically the conclusion is that just about every guitar has uneven frets, unless it's already been leveled, in which case you may find that it doesn't have uneven frets and that you can just play it, lower the action and play it. But like I said, it hardly has anything to do with the price point or the brand, and I've spent sometimes longer fret levelings on Gibsons as I have on Fenders. That's just about there on that one. Fenders, or budget guitars, vintage guitars, which is considered a budget guitar. So there's, and some I kept a record for quite some time when I started off of the different, how many frets on each guitar were uneven, relatively uneven, and by how much, or to add a kind of assessment of the severity of the unevenness. And what was really interesting was, first of all, yes, finding out that every guitar, just about 99% of guitars, came out of the factory and off the retail shop wall with uneven frets, which limited the playing action from the outset. But I also found that most people had never done this work or had it done, so the majority of guitars remained with high actions to accommodate these uneven frets. And then what I also found was that amongst individual brands and models like V100s, for example, little tiny zing up there, there was a huge variation in the amount of unevenness, in the number of frets that were uneven. Occasionally I get a vintage V100 with as little as 40% uneven frets. Many would have as high as 80%, 85% uneven frets, and some very severely uneven. So there was not a lot of rhyme or reason as to which and why, and you'd get a huge variation across the same model of guitar from the same manufacturer. And then sometimes you would find one that just was pretty perfect or almost spot on from the start, in which case you could be fairly sure that the frets had been leveled in some way. One that was like that I still really haven't been able to explain why they were so good, was the Rally GL 300 Les Paul copies, and I've had several of those, bought and sold several, played several, and one thing that stood out on all of them was straight from the factory. They were all just about perfect in terms of their fret level. You could set a 1mm low last action, last fret lower E action, and 1mm high E last fret action, and the guitars would play right out the box, mostly. Some of the other Rally models weren't as good. They were nicely made guitars and sounded great, but they didn't have the same kind of precision in the action, in the playing action. So they took a little bit more work, but so I'm going to stop there. That's pretty good. What I will say is, things are dirty. What's evident is that the wear that we saw before, the flattened out frets, the one that's glued in and stuck, sitting proud of the fingerboard, has still required hitting on even further now, and that's no surprise. Now obviously the next step for me, rather than leave it flattened like that, I'll do my very best to reshape it. So now at this point I'm going to take the strings off because we've done the leveling, and the next part of the game is to reshape the individual frets, because they're currently flat on top, and some quite a bit, as you saw right down here. I'm going to reshape them using a custom tool or a dedicated tool. And then what I'm going to do while the strings are off and before I do anything else, I'm going to cut the nut down to a much more manageable size, and then I'll also do a bit of filing on those sticking out frets at the end that we can feel here, do a little bit of remedial work on those. Once I've done that, then it's a matter of polishing these frets out to a playing condition, and we can then clean the whole guitar up, do the electrics bit, put that right, and then we're going to sort out what sits, those things, spinning pots, and then once that's done we can restring it and it will be ready for its final tweaks, which will be a bit of intonation. The great thing about this is once you've done this relative fret leveling here, the frets will go back into their relative level positions whenever you reload the neck. So right now the neck is now relaxed, and technically the frets won't exactly be level because the neck's now flattened out a bit. But as I say, as soon as we put the load on it with the same gauge of strings or similar, it's going to go back into the same level configuration that it was when we just did the leveling. So back in the playing configuration, it'll resume its levelness, is what I'm saying. Okay, I'm going to make a bit of noise here with this drill thing. Take down some of this. Smell of burning bones. I love it. Still loads of room to go. Stop there. So it's a much prettier, smaller profile nut, and it's custom cut so that you can see the shape of it there, but it's going to be, it's hardly sticking up at all by comparison. Right, next stage then is to repaint the frets, again using the pen as a guide to what the file is doing. So it's always, this marker pen thing is always a temporary guide. It's very useful too. And you'll see in a minute that the idea now is to use a concave file to go over these flattened frets wherever they are flattened, and the aim is to wear away the edges of the flat spot in order to round it off so we approach the original shape, arch shape of the frets. And when you do it, the thing you'll see is if the fret is pretty well shaped as it is, it'll immediately cut the marker off the top. If the fret is quite flattened, like this one is, you'll immediately see two thin metal lines as the curved edges here start to bring in the flattened edge. And the idea is you watch that black line of marker pen and you just keep working the fret until that black line becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, which means you're rounding the fret more and more and more. But so long as you retain that little pencil thin line down the middle, it means you have avoided touching the top of the fret, and that means its relative levelness relative to the frets outside of it that we just achieved through the process we just did is intact and hasn't been altered. And that's what we want more than anything, because that was the point of this operation, was to level these frets. If we ended up digging some new holes or creating some new flat spots by doing this, we would be wasting our time completely. It would be a pointless exercise, because as soon as we put the strings back on, you'd find chokes and pings and buzzers and God knows what. Okay, so moving along quite quick. There are some more obviously at this end that are going to take a little bit longer. Some of them, like I say, just go straight, scrape the pen right off, and then there's occasionally a little spot somewhere in the middle that you have to work on a bit longer. So you can see it's not a slow process, this exactly. You can have to put in some labour when you get to a really flattened fret, like we will in a minute. My experience is about 4 times quicker, or a quarter of the time, of using the traditional three-sided file method. Although I have to say the three-sided file method is just fractionally more accurate, just by virtue of the fact that it never touches the top of the fret, whereas this often does, despite your best efforts. Okay, so nearly there. It's going to be difficult to work this one because it's obstructed a little bit by the selector switch, but there is obviously this flattened fret here is showing showing it needs a lot of work, so I might just turn it round to work on this one. Again, sometimes it can be required to have been so flattened that you can't quite get the perfect shape back out of it, and you have to concede a bit of a defeat, and you have to leave it slightly flattened at the edge. It's the best you can do. The reason this, as I said before, the reason this one had to be unusually flattened off is because of the degree to which it was sticking up at the ends, which made getting the correct shape out of it slightly impossible. Had it not been sticking up, then we wouldn't have levelled it that way, and it would have been able to retain the shape much better. Just looking back through here, there's a couple of spots that I might want to just linger on a little bit longer to get them as rounded off as possible before going to the next stage, but that's pretty much it. So after this comes a fun stage of masking off the guitar. Now I should have thought about this, I'm practically out of decent masking tape. This is probably going to cause me no end of issues, but with this masking tape is slightly damp and it's also slightly sticky, so I'm just going to take off a bit of its high-powered stickiness by pressing it down, if I can even get the strips off, by pressing it down on the towel, because I really don't want it, with any guitar, I don't want it to stick too much to the finish, because it just means it's harder to get off. It means increased amount of time trying to clean it off, trying to clean left behind glue residue. So this is just a little way of taking regular. I normally buy low tack, but my supplier has run out of it. So this is that happens to be a tape of regular stuff, which is a bit stickier. So anyway, you can see I'm just making it a little bit less sticky. It seems to be working. I've also got to cut a set of smaller strips to get down to the thinner frets. But the idea is to get all of the fingerboard masked off. Again, it's covered in fret grit. It doesn't matter at this stage, we can just go over the top of that for now. This next bit is about polishing the frets back to a playing sheen. Once we've done that, then we can do cleaning up and get rid of all the dust that's sitting on this body, because it is that fret leveling process, and the sanding process that comes next is a dusty business. So I'm pretty much at the last fret that I can do with a single piece, an uncut piece, I think. I'll just get this at a stretch. I think that's Chuck at the Moon speaking. Well spoken chappy. Pleasant fellow, I think is the correct word. So the bridge is on here, it's quite tight, so it's not going to fall off, that's right. I'm going to hang the guitar out of the way for a minute. The other thing about the nut is to just, I will in a minute, but to check the front edge of it and just smooth off any sharp edges. There's no reason for it to be sharp, and anything that catches the hand while you're playing is an unnecessary discomfort, so we can just take care of that now. As with the fret edges, what I'm in fact going to do is I'm going to go back, once I've cut these strips, I'm going to go back for a second to the fret edges and do a little bit of remedial work on them if I can. Constantly losing the blades I need or running out. Annoying. So I've done this so many times now that the number of pieces I need or the layout of the tape is, I'll do it with my eyes closed. It's 4 pieces along this particular piece of wood, cut 2 of them cut into thirds longwise. Actually quite hard to do, especially with a thing that isn't that, it's a bit blunt, so I'm going to try and snap it off. I got myself a sharp edge, roughly, nearly a sharp edge again. So 2 of these strips in 3 long ways, and then the other 2 in 2 long ways, and then that together, and then cut them all into 4 downwards, and then that creates enough strips to do the whole thing. But as you can see, it's not that easy to do, especially with this ruler, which doesn't quite press as flat as I'd like. Anyway, so then we find the cut point, which is out there. So I'm interested to listen to Radio 4's any questions tonight, see what the popular view is on the election result. I don't suppose it'll be much that surprises me. Okay, so just going back to the frets themselves. Well, we've got the camera. Is the camera still running? Yeah. So down here, I've got some. Actually, they're slightly rounded off already, courtesy of the reprofiling file. But these, bottom line is that these are sticking out a little bit too much, and ideally you wouldn't want that. And if I well, I was going to say one way would be to use the diagonal beveling file, but it's in a difficult part of the neck, so I won't. What I'm just trying to do is just cut these down a little bit so they don't stick out, but most of it will be done by softening it off with sandpaper. But if there is any major overhang, I might as well cut it down now if I can. I mean, because it's sticking up, you still can get your finger on it, under it, if you really want to. But just want to make sure it doesn't catch. I might just also run round each edge like this, just to round this off, tiny fraction. It's good to do this at this point because you've got the whole length of sanding process to soften any adjustments or little filing marks you make. So I'm going to, my first grade of paper that I sand with is going to be 600 grit, which is nice for just sort of softening off any marks at the ends of these frets. And I'm going to make sure that I use that 600 grit to soften this run as much as possible, and probably take some of the sharpness off this binding as well. Or I won't mind pressing hard on it if it, so long as it takes some of that sharpness away too. So I'm just sort of whizzing down here, using the edge of this file to take any burrs off these frets. Fairly quick process. While I'm there, it probably makes sense to just round off the front edge of the nut if I can with the same file, just to take some of the sharpness off it. So this is soft to the touch as it can be, reasonably. It's done. And then I'm going to whiz down here, probably not a very good view, doing the same thing with the edge of this file. So this is just an additional thing you can do at this point to improve the overall feel of the guitar. And again, often guitars come out of the factory with sharp little corners and edges like this, which all add up to a less than ideal playing experience. It's a little trickier right up here. Right. Now we'll go back to the sticky masking tape business. And again, It's been on the board already, so I don't have to worry too much now about picking up fluff to stop it being too sticky. But just I'm going to double up the first few to cover the seam, and then on we go, cover the whole thing off. So I'm going to stop in a second the video because the next phase is going to be noisy and just going to involve half an hour or so of me and some sandpaper, and I'm tired of talking about it and doing it. So I'll stop that, and then I will come back when it's time to just tighten up or examine the rest of it, clean up and tighten up those pots, and then we'll be ready to restring. But as you can see, in a way, having done the nut, having set the action, and then having set the relief, and then, or the other way around, knit relief, action, nut, is typically the way I do it, but having done those three things and then level the frets, the sort of hard precision work is done. This guitar now will play very well, and it's been done. I've aimed for a ridiculously low action, so I expect it to play at 1mm final fret action, but in fact it might play better, slightly freer at 1.5 on the low E, which is where I put most of the actions on most of my guitars. It's very rare I go above that, and it's actually not quite so common that I go below it, because on certain guitars like SGs, 1mm seems to work pretty well. On some guitars it doesn't. I've never found a Telecaster, for some reason, why a last fret action of 1mm works very well. May have to do with the typical radius that the guitar like a Telecaster has. It's often, or it can often be, quite vintage tight radius. Mind you, that's not all the time. So maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing out loud. But for some reason, some guitars just love the lowest action. The SG tends to, because the neck is so flexible, because most of the adjustable, in fact almost all of the neck is outside of the body, and pretty much the same thickness most of the way along, so it leaves you with a very responsive neck, not encumbered by a mass of mahogany holding it back, and as a result it seems to adjust very responsively, and I consistently get 1mm actions out of them. Even the cheapest ones, there just seem to be something about that configuration. Not surprised when you look at how far outside of the body the neck actually sits. Obviously that has its downsides, one of which is the neck heavy, headstock heaviness of the SG, which can make it an absolute pain to play. It can make it impossible actually to play after a certain point. But anyway, so the thing about this guitar, in terms of the wiring, which I'm not going to touch, I'm just going to make sure the pots are stable. The thing about the wiring on this guitar is that it's wired the Peter Green way, and it means, I think, that one of the combinations is a middle combination. The pickups are in series instead of parallel, or the other way around, I can't remember now. But the point is it was, the story goes that it was an accident in somewhere where he put the guitar in to be wired or fixed or pickups changed, and as a result of the accident the pickups were wired in parallel or series, whichever is the opposite from Norway, and the result of that was that they kind of give a hollowed out, scooped out sound, which is a little bit like you can get out of the out of phase combinations using the Brian May Red Special copies, and which Brian May himself built in deliberately into his guitar and used. And so this has a bit of that sort of scooped out hollow sound, which became a kind of a signature sound. Peter Green, they say. I'm not that well versed in his stuff, so I don't know, but I know that's why this guitar was copied, and this Icon, or I don't even know what this is called, this is the Icon series, but This is obviously a tribute guitar, so it's made in the style of, right down to the spare tuner holes on the headstock, which look like somebody's changed them out, but obviously they haven't. It's how the guitar was originally. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going over the whole of the top end of the guitar to make sure that the important bits are out of the way of, first of all, sandpaper, so I don't want sandpaper scuffing up the paintwork, although it's dull anyway, it wouldn't be too much of a problem on this one. But I'm just going to make sure that the pickups that I'm likely to hit with the sandpaper are covered, and covered just to keep some of the dust off them. So there's my guitar ready for the polishing process. But I will save you from the sheer mind-numbing boredom of that. Alright, so I'll see you when it's all done. Back in a minute. Okay, just coming towards the end of this guitar. I've just had a little fun moment. Rather foolishly reused one of the screws that was already in this truss rod cover set, and it sheared off in exactly the same place as the one I'd already removed, because it's already weakened. I shouldn't have reused the same three, but anyway. So as a result, it's now still in there because it broke at a level that I couldn't anymore get pliers to it. So it's kind of back where it was. So I thought I'd improved it a bit, but I've basically left it exactly how I found it. That's a bit odd, that is, but there we are. It serves me right for accidentally. I thought I'd replaced the that I was replacing it, and I ended up reusing the same worn, or not the same, but one of the three weakened screws. Anyway, so what I'm doing right now is I'm just restringing. I have done all the polishing of the frets. I've shortened or reduced down the nut, and I've oiled the fingerboard, cleaned the whole of the guitar. I've done the not jack plugs, I've done the pots, just tightened them up and added a little bit of thread lock to them so that they are not going to come undone in a hurry. So it's all really done except for stringing this up, stretching out the slack, making sure it's all playing nicely, and then just double checking and setting the intonation, which is my favourite Tune-o-matic bridge arrangement, which I absolutely hate doing it on. There never seems to be enough room or enough space to intonate properly. Still, we'll give it a go. And particularly on V100s, I almost always get into a situation where I have to take the saddles off and turn three of them around to reclaim the sort of needed intonation room. But let's, fingers crossed, let's hope that doesn't happen today. Anyway, apart from that, we're nearing completion, and we're loading this up with a set of 9s, pulling back about a fret's worth to wind it on, give plenty to grip, well, enough to grip but not too much, so you store up loads of slack. And I go once over the loose string, pull the loose string up, and then the second time round I go under the loose string, which kind of gives it a bit of a locking device or locking feel to it. Check it down this end to make sure it's seated on the thing, bridge. So it's all good, apart from that truss rod cover, which just a small annoyance. It's not significant, but it's I thought I'd done really well. I've even got the bit of the leftover screw over there somewhere. Anyway, I've also decided that I will leave the price tag on it. I'm always personally would much prefer taking somebody's tags off things, but I'll leave that to Craig to take off in his own good time. Okay, so again, just get this in the slot, align it over there, and we should be good to go. Now at the point of coming to do the tuning up and the stretching, the thing I'm listening out for from this point onwards is pinging in the slots. You know, it sounds like a good old-fashioned Bible song. Pinging in the slots is a it's the way of telling me, or it's the best guide to whether I'm going to have stable tuning or any tuning problems. And if we do get pinging from the slots while we're tuning, it tells me that the string is binding in the slot, and the slot needs a small amount of widening, as we can do with sandpaper. Very judicial use of sandpaper. But as it stands, we are at the kind of stage of, let's get the first sort of pulls to get everything seated on properly, and then I've got a spare E over there in case I break this one tuning it up. What I'll do is I'll do the first tune to the tone. Now I'm expecting that to go out of tune even as I speak, which it will do. Okay, so that's our first tune up, and then comes the stretching of the strings, thumb and forefinger to stretch out the slack without doing any damage over the, or stressing them over the saddle points ideally, or the nut point. It's usually the saddles that's sharpest. So this is going to, it always does, this will detune the guitar a fair bit. And I'll tune up again and do this a few more times and keep going until basically there's no more detuning. That means there's no more stored up slack coming out. I've probably said this several times, many times if you've heard my videos before, but this doesn't come out on its own free will unless you bend it all out within, you know, a couple of weeks of playing non-stop. But most of the time it will just sit there until you come to play, and then you'll bend a note. Hear that ping? Keep an eye on that in the D slot. So more tuning, more stretching, and we'll get there. Won't be far now. Let's see. You can easily overstress it, and I quite often break an E string. Yep. So the D needs work. Alright, so D is the only one that needs work, and I'm going to do it now with a little bit of 600 and a blade. And the idea is just to get that in there. I'll start with the top end of the blade and just get into the slot and just basically work it a little bit side to side in the slot. It's mainly the width that's the issue. we go. Okay, so let's just check the relief on this. Make sure it was the same gauge strings that we had on before. Yeah, there's enough relief in there. Okie dokie. Okay, measurement, just a quick measurement on here, and we have, actually that's higher. Why is that higher? Has that moved? I thought it felt a bit up. Let's take it down a bit. I think I must have turned the thingy, turned the post somewhere during all of this. It's higher than I want. So down we go. Tiny bit more. And take a note. And this is currently set at under 1, so that needs to come up a little bit. Okay, 1 and 1.4. Okay, that is good. We are there. I'll just put him up there for a minute, and the last stage, any second now, let me just get tidy up a little second. The last stage will be to intonate, and I'll put this on hold because I want to go in and get my tuner for that rather than use the app. With these Les Pauls, I feel a bit more confident with the tuner app. No, the tuner, the boxed tuner. So I'll use that instead. So I need to go and get it. And just move everything else kind of out of the way, safe. There we are. Okay, so I'll see you in a minute for the intonation. So I don't really know what this guitar is. I just realised I've been calling it Peter Green because it's this relic thing, deliberately relic thing with the two different coloured knob things on it. But it doesn't have the Peter Green pickups, so I don't know whether these. I don't know what model it is, and it's not the. I don't think it's the AFD. I don't know. Anyway, it's a vintage V100 sort of thing. That's all I can reliably say. I'm going to I haven't actually even switched it on, tried it out yet. So just move this over here. That fret there is still higher than everything else, slightly higher than everything else. Well, I think it's got a pretty big sound to it, somewhere in that. My conclusion is that this second to last fret, something bad has happened to this somewhere in the past. It's not seated properly, and it's still, at this action, it's still sorry, it's the last fret. That could actually be taken down manually, that last fret. It wouldn't hurt anybody. Anyway, before I go back and think about that, let's just do the intonation part. So, like I said, don't know the exact model of this guitar. Craig described it as a V100. I don't know which model it is exactly. Right, let's have a look at the intonation. And it's hard to get to, it's from the front actually. Right, there we go. Everything is a little bit on the sharp side, but there's no more forward movement on this at all. So there's no. That's not too bad actually. Get it right. So the first time it looked sharp. Sorry, I'm not confused. Was it sharp or flat? I can't remember now. Anyway. It's not too bad actually. So difficult to do. A. edit this out, sorry. I'm not really getting this thing. It's interesting. It isn't, the pattern here is set how you'd expect it. It's not reading right to me just yet. I'm not hearing it. And I don't know if it's tone. Tone full open. That's flat. It feels quite a long way flat. What it is, judging by this thing needs to step forward. It's not a single straight line backwards. What am I worried about? What am I thinking even? Here's me just trusting the straight line back, straight line configuration. And of course these things don't go in straight lines, they go in two pairs of three. So I'm dragging this one back forward, and you can see how clumsy it is to do it. That's not even far enough. Is that far enough forward? Maybe. No, it's actually probably ends up with this needing to come off and spin around at this rate, but let's see if we can get there with it as it is. So this is still technically out of sequence. Right, I'm going to do a changeover. It's annoying me. With this bridge, what you have is 3 of the saddles point one way and 3 point the other for no appreciable reason. Right, so several little annoying things. First of all, that pot comes off, and that's because this is widened at some point or squished at some point. Let's see if it will stay on. A bit better. Okay, so I'm going to have to slack this off. This is most annoying. Take this bridge off, and then basically reposition these 3 saddles, because they need to be, this needs to be closer than it is. It's unlikely that you would, basically the saddles on these describe, until I moved that one, described a complete single straight diagonal line, which isn't the way saddles on these guitars sit when you have two two threes, a pair of three sets, no, two sets of three, that's what I'm looking to say. So you have the thingy ones, the plain ones and the round ones, wound ones. So when you take this off, this was, let me just wind it back to where it was. This one was pretty much like this. So that basically describes, from the high E to the low E, that describes, if you look at the very tops of them, that describes 3 in a line, then a jump back, and then 3 in a line. Now the truth about this is this one usually starts forward of the last one. So it's kind of, it starts ahead of, a little bit behind this one, but forward of this one. So you get 3, then jump forward and then back 3. And this is quite the opposite. This is 3 in a diagonal, then a big jump back, and then 3 more. So there isn't enough. If these top ones are intonated, which it felt like they were, and they are right on the stops, then to get any more correct movement this way out of these 3, I'm going to have to take this bridge apart and turn them around, which is something you may have, if you ever watched me. In fact, I know Craig, you did watch my V100 videos. You'll have seen me do this countless times, cursing every time I've had to do it, and it's just, it doesn't seem right. It seems just such a terrible oversight or something. Okay, so there's our first 3, and of course they don't want to come out because they're not designed to come out. They're designed to sort of stay in, so they need a bit of force to help them out, which is not the best thing to get pliers and bridge saddles together, because they really don't work together. Hello. Yes. Oh, it was alright. It was nondescript. Look, guess what? I'm having to pull apart yet another tunematic bridge because it won't intonate properly, and of course it's stiff, so it won't actually come out of its own free will. I hate these things. Why do they make them? I've got to flip these 3 round as always, but they're completely stiff and they don't want to come out of their thingies. And as I say, without, that's what happens. It always kills me in the process. Ow. Don't like them. You can watch any of my V100 videos and see how much I hate the tunematic bridge for this reason. If you take this off, you turn it round, you put it back on the other way, and you bore yourself by doing it to all 3. And then you put it back in.
You need to be on Blue Peter.
And you put it back in, and you've given yourself another, I think, nearly 3 millimeters of saddle travel. But like I say, it's just not designed to come out and go back in, so it really doesn't want to play the game. So you can try and push it back in with all your skill and judgment, and it sometimes goes back in. Okay. I'll be in a minute. I'm just trying to finish this off. Okay. So normally this is kind of where you would find this second one. Not as far forward as this one. This should be on its, well, it's pretty much on its stops at the moment. I think that's as far as it will go. Oh, no, a tiny bit more. So you'd expect a spread between these 3, the first cluster of 3, 1, 2 and 3. They even move inside there. They're not even accurate. But anyway, so this next one you'd expect it to be near the front, and then these 2 actually might just save me, if I can get them to come forward, it might even just save me having to do the other 2. It might just be this one that's struggling. But look how difficult, how stiff that is. There's almost no way you can really successfully do that with that on there underneath the strings. I mean, it's just, it's crude engineering. So just looking at the tops, or the ridge, that is approximately, that could work that way. So it's turned one of them around and left two in place whilst hurting me. So we'll stick it back in and see, but I really don't like the stiffness of it, because it does make intonating it, not only is the design of it makes intonating it difficult, but the very stiffness of the pieces make the whole process just unbearable. I mean, you know, this one here, if I want to, will I be able to get any movement in that? No, it's practically locked in solid, and honestly I could chuck grease or anything in there and it wouldn't make any difference. It's just the sheer physics of it. It's not built for doing, it's not a good design for doing what it's doing, and I can't really do anything else to make it work better, other than sometimes, I mean, turning it round gives you more access to the screws, which is why I usually prefer it that way around, if it's my personal choice, and it doesn't make any difference, by the way. But it's the it's a world of annoyance, this tunematic bridge design, with this tiny little bar that's supposed to it's a design that's supposed to stop these little screws either coming out, or probably more likely in this case from rattling. But you can see that it actually doesn't want to go in, because it doesn't want to go around this screw. Let's sit in. Come on, tunematic, in you go. Thank you. Well, like I say, I guess I'm just hoping that this little turnaround will take care of that one bridge saddle and let me get the three positions that I want, or the three intonations that I want. Hateful saddle, hateful design. Should have, I mean, Fender had it right. That Fender tremolo saddle with the adjustment screws that it has. That's a much better way of doing it. Or, as some of the older Les Pauls had, just I was going to say a single wraparound piece, but I think they had, I don't think they had compensated ones anyway, so they just did it with pretty much a slope in one direction, a diagonal going in one direction, which isn't ideal. But you know what, it's so much better than playing around with these under-engineered bits of garbage known as the tunematic bridge. Anyway, let's try and get this tightened up again, and then we'll go through the process of intonating again. So that's, normally I would turn all three of those saddles around, but in this case it hurt my hand, so I was peeved. So I only did one, on the basis that it should have brought everything to the right position. It was only the one that was going to be short of intonation room. Okay, let's go back to this and see where we are with the intonation. So some volume. Okay. Yes. I have a horrible feeling I might have to go turn that one round. One little turn out of this and they can never tell which way. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I just hate the pneumatic bridge. Sorry to end on that sour note. But there we have it. Intonated, a tiny bit off on one of them, but it's so close that it's not worth taking the whole bridge off and stressing the strings out all over again. But I would rather a roller bridge with more travel room, one of the more modern roller bridges with a wider depth. One of the great things about replacing it for a roller bridge, even if it's not like the original, I mean it's not, changes from the original, putting a roller bridge on it gives you much smoother travel for your intonation, and it's much better. It's much better for intonating. That's really difficult with this old style, standard style pneumatic bridge, and I make no bones about it. I think they're lousy. But there we go. Right, so there we have it. The Vintage V100 in a sort of Peter Green style, but not with Peter Green pickups, and definitely there isn't the out of phase sound that you get with Peter Green wiring. So this is a V100, but it's got the relic on it, so I don't know which one it is. Reissued, Vintage V100 reissued or something. I don't know the actual model number of it. Maybe just V100. There we go. Anyway, great sounding pickups for what it is. Nice looking too. I'm gonna play it a little bit and may do some work on that fret because it's just slightly higher than the others. I'll have a see. I'll see whether a tiny adjustment in the action will clear us over it. But it's well, yeah, there's something wrong with the fretting here. Everything else just about worked out okay. So.